President Trump has long stated that he and his family, the target of a politicized Justice Department and FBI. In a recent op-ed on the FoxNews.com site, former Assistant Secretary of State Robert Charles agrees with President Trump. He writes, "I have interacted with some of these professionals during the past 2 decades and never perceived them as political. But something overcame them, grabbed them, and turned them into something else during the 2016 election campaign. They devolved into political animals." Former Assistant Secretary of State Robert Charles joins us right now from Washington, D.C. Robert, good morning to you.
Morning.
Who are you talking about?
Well, I want to just talk about this allegation that this is a reckless revelation, this memo. And in fact, it really isn't. There is a public right to know what's happening behind the scenes. It's a very secretive court. And at the end of the day, no sources and methods are given away in this memo. I do think every American should read both the memo and the opposition memo. But, in the grand scheme of things, it's odd to hear opposition to the release of this memo from people like Adam Schiff, because Adam Schiff has spent 9 terms arguing that there should be greater openness at the FISA court. He even wanted outside counsel to be able to present to that court. So I think in the biggest, there's always a weight, there's a moment after which the public right to know outweighs what you call sort of the endemic national security interest, and the national security interest actually tips in favor of the public right to know, and I think that's where we are right now.
Surely. I understand that of the 35,000 FISA warrants that have been requested through the years, how many were denied?
So of the 35,529 warrant requests between 1978 and 2013, only 12 were denied. And that's very peculiar as a starting point, but it's even more peculiar when you think that one of the denials that occurred was in June of 2016. And it was for a surveillance of this individual that was tied to the Trump campaign. Now, you have to understand how the FISA court works. There are 11 judges. Of that group, 4 are Democrats. But oddly, in October of 2016, they reversed themselves and granted this probable cause warrant for surveillance, apparently, of the Trump campaign. How did that happen? It happened because the press has not talked about this. There is a FISA review court, and there are only 3 members of that court. They were all appointed by Bill Clinton. And so one has to surmise that maybe this denial went to them, and individuals, 3 judges who were appointed by the husband of the candidate who provided the opposition research to the probable cause warrant, allowed this surveillance to go forward. And that again, is a very strong reason for the public right to know.
Would it surprise you if they did use that dossier that has been completely unverified as proof that they got to go after Carter Page because they heard George Papadopoulos spout off his mouth when he was liquored up overseas? Would that surprise you?
So not at all. Indeed, I think they did use it, and that's what the memo suggests. It goes to the heart of what is probable cause before the FISA court. 3 things are required. You have to be targeting a foreign intelligence agent. You have to be looking for either espionage or terrorism. And you have to think that a crime has been committed. Now, I'm not sure I see that in this memo. The memo doesn't suggest any of those things. But let's just imagine, they did all exist. You have a major problem, and that is this, what they call the fruit of the poisonous tree. If a 4th Amendment violation occurred, and there was literally a constitutional violation by the use of this false information to get the warrant, then the fruit of the tree is all the evidence that comes from that in the future surveillance warrants. And so really you've got a major problem. There are exceptions to that rule, but none of them fit here. McCabe has said that without that Steele dossier, they wouldn't have granted the warrant. That's number 1. Number 2, the only corroboration was a news story that was actually sourced to Steele. Ironically, there is no separate way to get that dossier. That's another exception. And finally, the good faith exception actually doesn't work because they knew that this information had come from a politically financed, Hillary Clinton financed source.
But Robert, ultimately, they said we're going after Carter Page, but really it was the Trump campaign. It was everybody in their circle. They were using this one guy as the excuse to spy on everybody.
It certainly looks that way, and then you have to ask about these hundreds of unmaskings of Americans. It's very troubling, and it should be to every American.
All right. Robert Charles, former Assistant Secretary of State to Colin Powell, former Bush and Reagan White House staffer, we thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you.